Spiritual awakening doesn't make you happier, it just makes it impossible to fake it anymore. There's a strange phase that comes after awakening. It's not the burst of light we were told to expect, not the endless bliss that the books promised. It's emptiness, a deep, hollow silence, like you've taken apart a clock, only to find nothing inside is moving. Everything you once chased, success, fame, love, now feels like an ancient language that no longer makes sense. You don't want to try anymore. Not because you're lazy, but because you no longer believe in the things that used to keep you up at night. Your old motivation has collapsed, and the new one hasn't been born yet. This is a psychological death, the unraveling of your former self, while your true self is still gestating in the dark. And if you're in that place, where everything that once mattered now feels meaningless, let me say this: you are not broken. You're standing exactly where the real journey begins. Today, we're going to talk about that phase, the strange fog that comes after awakening. Not because you're lost, but because you're finally leaving behind a self that's no longer yours. We live in a world where everyone is terrified of standing still. If you're not doing something, people assume you're lazy. If you don't have a plan, they think you're failing. If you don't have the answers, they ask, "What are you even doing with your life?" But no one tells you this. There are times when you need to pause, to breathe, to sit down. Not because you've given up, but because you've entered a sacred phase. The phase where you start to find yourself again. It's not loud. There are no spotlights. Everything seems to slow down. No applause, no one calling your name. But that's exactly when the real change is happening. Deep, invisible, and real. You're no longer chasing what used to exhaust you. You're no longer bending over backwards to please everyone. You find yourself floating in this strange, quiet space. But this is not the emptiness of despair. It's the silence before something new is born, like soil that needs to rest before it can bloom again. You, too, need to rest, so your soul can regenerate. Don't rush. Don't force clarity. Don't panic when your old motivation disappears, because that's the sign. You're no longer living from habit. You're learning to live from something much more honest. So, what do you do when you're in that still space? When you no longer know what you want, and nothing that once excited you seems to matter anymore? The answer isn't to do, it's to listen. Because in that silence, something important begins to rise. Not loud, not fast, but real, and undeniably you, at a deeper level. When you stop trying to be someone, that's when your true self has room to emerge. Not the version of you built by expectations, responsibilities, or fear, but the version aligned with something much quieter inside. You do things not because you should, but because they feel honest. You choose not what moves you forward on paper, but what brings you peace in your bones. This new motivation doesn't come from deadlines, performance metrics, or another pumped-up playlist. It comes from a still place, a place where you no longer have to prove anything. You simply show up, and from that presence, action begins to rise naturally. You might not know where you're headed yet, but you can feel something stirring, subtle, but clear. A quiet whisper that says, it's time to live differently, more deeply, more truthfully.
If you're feeling like you've lost your spark, your passion, and you have no idea what comes next, don't rush to judge yourself. This isn't the end. This is the doorway, the very first step back home to who you really are. That feeling of being lost, it's not proof you're off track. It's the quiet sign that you're actually on the right path. A path that's no longer flashy or performative, but real, human, and deeply yours. You haven't lost anything. You're letting go of what no longer belongs to make space for something truer, something that's lived inside you all along, just waiting for the chance to breathe. Trust this. A new version of you is being shaped, slowly, steadily, but without a doubt. And when you're ready, you'll move again, not because you have to, but because something inside you chooses to. Not out of pressure, but out of calling from the deepest part of you, where you're no longer running, but finally returning. Thank you for being here, for listening, for walking this with me. If this spoke to something inside you, share it with someone else who might be walking their quiet path too, because maybe they're looking for a small light, just like you were today.